In this first section, I'm going to talk about consumerism. So to start, I want to give a working definition of what I mean by consumerism. It can be defined in a lot of different ways, but I want to expand it more than just like the uh, ground level, street level way that we think about it in terms of shopping and spending. I'll define it as any attitudes and actions that give priority to wants and preferences over actual needs. So, of course, we most associate consumerism with shopping, with getting stuff, with spending money, and certainly that's a primary way that we can be very consumeristic. And us living in the US, that's certainly a way that we practice that, even sometimes as a default, when we don't really even think about it. But it leads me to what are some ways beyond that consumerism right now is being heightened. Well, for one, kind of take the medium of where we are mostly consumeristic just by shopping. At the first of the pandemic, when everyone was hoarding things, you go to grocery store aisles and there's entire aisles that are completely barren. They used to be filled up with toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning supplies, and everything is literally gone, picked over and gone. Well, now things have moved on and stores are replenishing things a lot quicker. But what I've noticed just on the street level view of this is people are more irritated now because their preferences and wants are not being satisfied immediately. Not just because there's stuff that they're wanting to buy is not there, but it's other stuff, other expectations that we have. Just the other day, I happened to be walking into a particular store and they reverted back to, instead of two entrances, just everybody was going into one entrance. I happened to walk behind a couple of groups of people. The person in front of me walks into the first set of doors, looks over to where you would normally see the shopping carts, and they were all gone. Probably because they had not moved everything over yet to make sure there were plenty of them. Well, she turns to the one employee that happens to be welcoming people there and just starts berating them. First, you guys close the doors and make us walk all the way down here, and then you don't have any shopping carts? I mean, she was just really giving the guy quite a tongue lashing, and the guy was like, I'm sorry, we're working on it, people are going to get it right now. But there was an expectation for preferences, not simply that it wasn't there, it's that she didn't want to have to walk back to the other entrance and actually get a shopping cart. And that, while in some ways is understandable, I think it's kind of another way where we're seeing some of this kind of consumerism being squeezed out through the heat that is this pandemic. But what about our groups? How might you and I be seeing that in our community groups? I want to talk about that, but first I want to be careful because I feel like if I don't give a little bit of warning, we may be prone to looking for the devil under every rock. So labeling everything that might have any hint of being consumeristic and labeling people that way, and that could be very damaging. First of all, because that could be very destructive rather than constructive. Labeling itself is not helpful. It just helps us categorize things. And that's really what I'm just trying to do, is trying to categorize some behaviors that we might be seeing people express, not to the point where we're always calling people certain labels, but I think it's helpful for us as leaders to know how to respond in certain ways when we're seeing certain types of behaviors, kind of like trying to diagnose how are we to shepherd someone when we're seeing particular ways that they're acting. So there are a few of those ways that where you might be seeing this. People's wants and expectations and preferences are probably not being met, mainly because the mediums through which we're connecting to one another have either been cut off completely or severely changed. Obviously, in-person gatherings are not happening, and if they are, they're very different. And there's all kinds of preferences that we all wish that we could have. We wish we could have childcare and not have to wear masks when we gather for worship. We wish that we didn't have to limit the size of groups that we're in, and certainly that's part of it. But there is also a reality that we have spiritual needs, and sometimes we may be seeing people choose their preferences and wants rather than persevering through a medium in order to get their spiritual needs addressed, and also forgetting that they have an opportunity to help address other people's spiritual needs. So consumeristic, first of all, has a me-centered attitude. It's all about gratifying my desires and not looking outward. So technology is one of those. I, like everyone else, is kind of tired. I'm tired of using Zoom and having to do things impersonally, but that's the medium that we have. And I need to persevere through that. But you may be experiencing, people that maybe at the beginning of this, they were willing to jump on a Zoom call or respond back more quickly to a group text or Marco Polo, and now they're just not. You're just left hanging quite a bit. That could be a manifestation of consumeristic ideas or behaviors or beliefs that are going on underneath the surface, like an undercurrent. And you're just seeing the top of the water when you are getting some feedback in the form of non-response or just lack of response, slow to respond. In-person stuff is obviously very different right now as well. There's less personal communication. There's changed personal communication. Relationally, people may be kind of pushing back a little bit because, it's just too hard in their minds to do something in a particular way that's different rather than persevering through it. And so all of those could be ways that we could be seeing people respond in a kind of consumeristic way. But you know that we've talked about being cultivators at City Church for quite a while rather than consumers. And so that's what we want to call each other to. We want to be cultivating the souls of one another and encouraging. So how do we do that in the midst of a heightened consumeristic time? Well, look at 1 Thessalonians 5:14. In it, Paul says, "And we exhort you, brothers and sisters, warn the idle, comfort the discouraged, help the weak, and be patient with everyone." So there's a fourfold thing that addresses this otherness that we need to recognize. Paul doesn't start with himself. He doesn't call the church to look at themselves first. He calls us all to look outward, to serve one another. And there's warning there, there's comfort, there's help to be offered, and there's patience to be extended. Paul is recognizing, even at the beginning of this letter, by the way, that his preference was to see them face to face and how hard it was to not do that. But yet he's choosing the medium of writing a letter from a distance away in order to communicate to this church and remind them to think of others rather than themselves, to help them. And so as leaders, we need to hear that for ourselves, of course, first. We need to be warned and comforted. We may need to be helped. We need to have people be patient with us. But we also need to remember, too, that we are to call others to this as well. Where we've grown idle with getting into the Word or jumping onto a Zoom call, we need to persevere through that. And where we're discouraged, we need to be honest about it so that people know how to help us. And we need to encourage others to share how we can help them. But through it all, we need to be patient with everyone. That is key. And so I hope, rather than being consumers, where we bail on each other and just kind of give up way too quickly, we will be in it for the long haul with others in mind and not just our own wants and needs, our own wants and preferences, rather, in view. So let's push one another to be cultivators rather than consumers.